Shortly after the lake was built, Thomas E. Hill and his partners commenced on phase 2 of their grand plan, and that was to build this glorious hotel above the lake. Now, a lot of people make the mistake of assuming that the hotel was built on Honeysuckle Hill, which it was not. It was built behind where I'm standing here on what is now called Lake Road. This particular road, by the way, was often in the early days referred to as Lover's Lane. I'll let you figure out why that was. In any case, the hotel was a 100-room hotel, big frame structure, beautiful palatial place on the hill behind me. But in 1906, it was empty, and it was struck by lightning, and it burned to the ground. In 1906, we had no fire department, we had no municipal water source, so there wasn't anything they could do except watch it burn. But it was quite a spectacle. Supposedly, the commuter train on the Aurora and Elgin tracks, when they saw the smoke and so forth, the train stopped and the conductor let everybody watch the hotel burn for some period of time. At any rate, that was the end of the hotel, and it was located here. And it also had an adjunct activity or operation, the 5 Mill Springs Pavilion, which we're going to talk about more in a few minutes. Well, we're now at a wonderful vantage point showing the boathouse, the so-called boathouse. Boathouse was a late addition to Lake Ellyn Park. It came in 1937. It was a WPA project, part of what they were doing in the Great Depression to try to help the local economy. They've been calling it a boathouse pretty much from day one, but it's never had a boat in it. In fact, it should be called the Recreation House. But in any event, so many people call it the boathouse that I notice the Park District now is given in, and they just put the sign up that says boathouse, because that's how everybody knows it. But it's been a wonderful place. It started out mainly as a place for winter gathering, because there were ice skating on the lake, and it was a place where people could gather and get warm. In fact, when my wife was a kid in Glen Ellyn back in the 1950s, she remembers very well coming to the boathouse and changing her skates into her skates there and so forth. So it's had a long and happy life here. It's been remodeled. It was modernized in the 1960s, and then quite recently the Park District decided to take it back to what it looked like, or more like what it looked like originally. But what you're looking at right now is one of the most photographed shots in all of Glen Ellyn. There have been literally hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures taken from this side of the lake looking across at the boathouse, and some share of those pictures have been converted into paintings. It's a great art subject for people who like to do art. So, moving right along. Well, in a sense, we are now where it all began, because this is the dam, the earthen dam that Thomas E. Hill and his partners erected back in 1891 to create Lake Ellyn. And it's got an interesting history in its own right. A few years ago, very few years ago, when they decided to put a sidewalk all the way around this lake, I was watching with great interest, and I noticed something interesting. It looks like I'm standing on a sidewalk, but it's really a weir. And you're probably wondering, what in the world is a weir? Well, it's a device for helping to stabilize an earthen dam. And this sidewalk actually goes down about 3 feet, and it's heavily reinforced concrete, and it's designed to keep the earthen dam from failing if the dam is overspilled again. And they also introduced some additional gates and control valves and so forth. They have drained Lake Ellyn on several occasions, partly to clean it, and in one occasion to put some piping underneath it to take the runoff from the streets in the wintertime, which is salt-laden and tends to keep the lake from freezing. And they put these pipes underneath to take the water, or take the salty water through and not pollute the lake with it, so they have better ice skating. Another clever idea. When they do drain the lake, though, those of us who are into Glen Ellyn history have a field day. The things that we see in that lake, in fact, more than one car has been recovered from Lake Ellyn that nobody knew was there. And we've got some wonderful photos in their archives at the Historical Society, including one of a little kid's tricycle that somebody threw in the lake. At any rate, it's all part of the history. part of the attraction of Lake Ellyn Park and Lake Ellyn itself is all the different things you can do here. That includes fishing. It's not famous as a fishing lake, but a lot of people like to drown worms here, and there are a lot of the traditional panfish. What some people don't realize is that there are also some very large fish in here. The trouble is they are mostly catfish and carp, and they're very difficult to catch. But I mentioned earlier about the dam overspilling and some heavy rains, and I was down here with my camera taking pictures of that. And when that happened, fish came over the top of the dam along with the water. And I have a wonderful photo of a man who's picked up a carp that is, well, he's holding it here, and the tail is scraping on the ground. That's how large that fish is. And I've shown that on occasion to little kids who are drowning worms trying to catch bluegills, and their eyes get big and they want to catch that fish. And he put it back in the lake, so it's probably still there, but it's not easy to catch. But it's one of the many fun things you can do around Lake Ellyn. Another piece of interesting related history. At the time they built the lake and the hotel, and we're trying to make this a tourist attraction, they were aware of the mineral springs that emerged at the corner of Chittister and Ryford. They actually were the 5 springs that came to the surface at that point. They built a big pavilion over these 5 springs and seats and so forth so you could sit around them. And they advertised it as a place where people could come and take the water. I've never been able to figure out if taking the water means soaking in it or drinking it, and we don't have any photos to demonstrate either way. But they did believe that those springs, each of the 5, had medicinal qualities. And it was part of the attraction of staying at the hotel, walking just down the road on Ryford, and taking in the waters at the 5 mineral springs. It's such an iconic part of Glen Ellyn history. If you look at the logo of the Glen Ellyn Historical Society, it is the roofline of the 5 Mineral Springs Pavilion. Well, that pretty much wraps up our circuit of the lake, our tour of Lake Ellyn Park. But before we conclude, I'd just like to invite people to come by here. There's a ton of interesting information waiting for you if you want to tour the inside of the boathouse, and I would encourage everyone to do it. Thank you very much for joining me in this little walking tour of Lake Ellyn Park. It's always an interesting place, always a delightful place, and I encourage people to come visit it. Thank you.
More about this and hundreds of other fun and interesting stories from Glen Ellyn's past? Drop by Stacy's Corner Store, located in the Glen Ellyn History Center at 800 North Main Street. Stacy's Corner Store carries a complete selection of books about Glen Ellyn's history. Add them to your library today.